if you focus on actually being authoritative, on creating unbelievable content in your niche and making sure it's fantastic content, it works. But it's not a 2-week strategy. It's a 15-year strategy.
So today I'm joined by Seth Rosen, and Seth is a real estate broker turned investment banker turned something else. We're going to talk about that right now. But Seth likes rocks, and especially sparkly gem kind of rocks. I'm going to find out why in a minute. But he bought his first web-based business back in 2008. He managed to grow it to a couple of million, then raised 30 million of venture capital money, ended up selling it, buying it back again. All kinds of fun things happened. And he created this business called CustomMade.com that we're going to talk about. But on the side, and as well, and we're going to talk about this too, he managed to create 2 online communities and build a subscription-based membership business. So that's what I want to dig into today. So keep listening to today's podcast to learn about how to build a successful subscription-based membership business. But thank you, Seth, so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And I want to go right back to the beginning because this is an interesting evolution. Real estate to investment banking to raising venture capital to buy business and then sell it and buy it back. What was all going on back there, and what was your inspiration, I guess, for getting into the world of rocks from real estate?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of an interesting journey. I started, I think, as you mentioned, I started my career as a real estate broker during college. I had a scholarship to go to BU here in Boston, an outside scholarship, and that paid for my school, but it didn't really pay for anything else. So I needed a job, and I started renting apartments. And after that stopped, it was sort of time for me to do something different, kind of time for me to go out on my own and sort of pursue this entrepreneurial dream that I had. And I ran across this website, CustomMade.com. It was run by old website, really old, crappy website. Started in 1996 by this guy, Ted Wheaton-Krause, in Western Massachusetts, who basically built the website to teach himself how to build websites. And it kept coming up in search. It had a few hundred fine furniture makers on it. And we reached out to Ted, Mike and I, and we're like, we'd like to buy your business. And so we bought it. And, initially we turned it into a subscription business for makers. Our initial idea was, let's create CustomMade.com should be custom anything, custom everything. So that's what we built, right? We built a listing service for all kinds of makers. We expanded it from fine furniture to include other types of makers, so jewelers, woodworkers, metalworkers, glassworkers, etc. Built a pretty small but somewhat break-even business, and we had this idea that we needed to raise venture capital to build a big business. And that's what we did. And we turned it into what it is now, which is the world's largest online custom jeweler. So instead of standing between the jeweler and the customer, we became the jeweler. And that's what we are. We're an online custom jeweler. And
so, I mean, that decision to pivot into custom jewelry, is that because, I mean, now you've launched these memberships for around jewelry and gems. Is that something that was always a passion for you, or just something that, as you saw what was working within the original Custom Made site, like the margins were better for you on those? Or how was it that you decided on sparkly rocks to be the focus of this?
Yeah. So it's almost like an interesting side story, right? I mean, one of the key learnings from Custom Made version 1 is we bought an old shitty website. Can I say website on here?
You just did.
And what did we do, right? I mean, we had the germ of something very interesting, and we sort of built something else on top of it. And in 2013, so I was interested in gems for a while. I had been a gem collector since 2009, 2010. And in 2013, I was a member of the International Gem Society, gemsociety.org. And I was on his email list, and I think I paid like $12 a year to be in this thing. And he emailed out the membership and was like, I'm retiring. guy Don Clark, who's unfortunately since passed away, emailed the membership and was like, "Look, I'm looking to get out of this thing. And I'm looking to retire. Does anybody want to buy it?" And I suspect, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect I was the only person that emailed back. And if you saw the website, you'd realize why, right? You kind of needed, I don't know what the best way to put it is. You needed a lot of vision. But there was a lot there. He had created a lot of content. It had been around for a long time. The content was very good. And I had some experience buying old websites, right? And especially authoritative old websites where someone had spent a lot of time, put a lot of passion into making them cool. And I just thought what he did was awesome. And I was like, I'd like to buy this from you. I think I can take it to whatever its next version is. I think I can do something with it. And he was like, yeah, great. And he's like,
how much did you pay for it?
$26,200. I asked him, I was like, how much do you want for this? Of course, it's like one of the first things you ask, right? And he's like, $26,000 plus a $200 fee to like wire the money or whatever. And it's like, the guy didn't have analytics installed. Like, I knew the website because I'd used it, right? But there was no information, right? It's like one of those, you ever see that show Storage Wars?
Yeah.
It's like that, you know? He's like, $26,000. I was like, yep. And website, own it. So that was the purchase process. You ask someone how much something costs and they have a number that's that specific, you don't want to negotiate with that person. That's a mistake. I learned that. So I was like, great, sold. And yeah, we've been building it ever since. It has grown tremendously, but it's still my hobby. Like we spend money on stuff that objectively, if I tried to sell the business to someone else, it's proven very beneficial, but it was not a strategic decision. It was a passion decision, what we spend money on. We spend money writing about, we just wrote the world's largest article on emerald treatments. This guy, Jeffrey Bergman, who collaborates with us, right? I don't know how much we spent editing this, publishing it. I mean, crazy amount of money. I will never get my money back from this, ever, in a million years. But it's just awesome. It's just amazing stuff. I love it. So, and here's what's funny. It's been the same strategy since the beginning, but because I'm willing to spend more on content, because I collect the content, people started citing us. The Guinness Book of World Records is calling me, being like, "Hey, this person says the world's largest ruby is this, whatever. Can you verify it?" It's like, do you have the wrong number? Like, they're like, "No, this is the International Gem Society, right? We got your, a guy at Caltech said I should call you." It's like, someone at Caltech knows who I am? Like, what? But it's crazy, right? And so it's an example, I think, of where, a lot of people are like, follow your passion. I think this is a particular example of where, what did we do, right? What we proved is if you focus on actually being authoritative, on creating unbelievable content in your niche and making sure it's fantastic content, it works. But it's not a 2-week strategy. It's a 15-year strategy. Once you have it, it's very difficult to unseat.
So how long have you owned International Gem Society for then?
So he started it in 1990. Don started in 1998. I've owned it since 2012 or 2013, I think. So what is it, 7 years?
And have you tell us about how it's evolved? Obviously, you've improved. You had a vision for the website and improved it. And what's the impact been on the membership and the subscriptions? Yeah,
the subscriptions grow every year. I mean, it's amazing. And so what I think is interesting is I've learned a few tactical lessons too about membership sites, which I'm happy to share. It seems like it might be interesting to your listeners. But my theory is, how do we sell a membership what did I always like about International Gem Society when I was a member, right? I liked that Don published really good premium content, and it was so cheap. It was always so cheap. It was never like, I never had to think about it, right? It was, and that's what we went for. So it's $75 for a year. And we must publish 100 top tier articles, updating price guides. I mean, there's so much value on the site for $75 that if you have a loose interest in gems, you should just be a member of it. Like, and that's exactly what we go for. If you have to think too much about it, like it's like that's not for us. It's not $30 a month, right?
Yeah.
We're just we make it. I don't want to call it cheap. That's not the objective, but we want to add a ludicrous, offensive amount of value. I want you to feel like you're stealing from me because it's so cheap.
Yeah. How can you tell us how many subscribers or members you have?
Yeah, I think we posted up on the site like 13,000 or something now, something like that.
Yeah.
It's a little skewed because at one time we had free memberships, and so probably 4,000 or 5,000 of those were free memberships. So what do we have? Maybe 6,000 members, or I don't know. I could probably tell you, but it's it's certainly 5,000 members anyway, 6,000 members anyway. The retention's very, very high. And every year our budget for content just keeps going up, and that makes it harder and harder to unseat us. Like, no one else in this space is willing to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on content.
And so, I mean, you've got an e-com business with CustomMade.com, and you've got a subscription. Or actually, you've got two, because you actually have two membership sites. What do you love and hate when you kind of think of the two side by side? It seems like the membership sites are very much passion driven. You love the content anyway. You love investing in producing content for it. But when you kind of assess them side by side, and obviously you decided to get another membership site, so you clearly love the model. But tell me about what you love and hate about the model when you're comparing and thinking about an e-com business versus a subscription business. They're two very different things. One, you're holding lots of stock. You're thinking about SKUs, and you're selling. I mean, that's custom jewelry. There's a lot of there's a lot of moving parts with that. Whereas a subscription business, obviously you're producing lots of great content that people think's worthwhile. But what do you love and hate about both of them? And I'm intrigued that you're running two very different business models side by side. And how do you see them kind of complementing one another?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways they do. They complement each other. It's different ownership structures. My wife and I just own the membership businesses. I mean, we bought them when they were microscopic, and they've just grown as we've run them over the years. So they're really just personal investments of Lisa and mine, whereas CustomMade is a much, much larger business with candidly a lot more scale potential. They're very mutually beneficial solely because one gives me fantastic context on the market opportunity for the other. So, it happens that CustomMade is extremely strong in color gems because I know a lot about color gems. I understand the market really well. We have lots of sources and things that other people would have a very difficult time picking apart because it's quite a complex and opaque market. Like, there's lots of little things like that, and they're more founder fit oriented than they are like this business sends business to the other business. There's a little bit of that, but that's not the primary motivator. It wasn't even really a motivator for me. Like, it's more, it gives us a lot of context on different aspects of the market. In terms of the model, it's not so much that I love like subscription or I love e-com. Like, it's more about model and customer match, is what it's about for me, right? Like, I think IGS is a membership model, not because I was like, oof, membership model, visionary. Right. It was more like, Don ran it as a membership business. He didn't do a particularly great job on the membership aspect. He did an amazing job on other things. And I was like, wow, the membership piece of this is like the undiscovered value here. Like, we should just be building out. We should be taking the germ of what he did and making it into something that works. And whoever big it gets, it gets. Whereas with CustomMade, I mean, it's a very different business. We make everything for each customer fully from scratch every time, which on the face of it should actually be a very bad business. But we've figured out some really interesting ways to do it, and that's been a lot of fun. But that's, again, much larger business, 8-figure business trying to get to be a 9-figure business, whereas Gem Society is like, if we could get to be a seven-figure business, or seven-figure business, that's perfectly fine. It just means we can put more money into content. We're not. I'm under no illusions that Gem Society will keep me in the lifestyle to which I've grown accustomed, unless I was willing to kind of gut it out and stuff like that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, you mentioned a few tactics in terms of, and I think what's really interesting is that, you've invested heavily in content, and that has been, and what the impact of that is that you've seen really high retention rates. You're trying to give people amazing amounts of value so that they'd be stupid not to keep their subscription going. But tell us over the years, like as you've seen or as you've evolved that membership offering, what's worked and what hasn't worked?
I think monthly memberships for at least for my websites have never really worked that well. And even if I charge you more, like I just find monthly members, for me at least, tend to be very, very transactional. They want one piece of information. They want to read one article.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. We do still offer monthly plans, but it's interesting. Like if you look at my support costs and you look at the distribution of my support costs across annual and monthly memberships, disproportionately monthly, right? If you look at the churn of monthlies, insane relative to annual, right?
Yeah.
If you look at engagement level with the platform, like yearly far exceeds monthly. So it's like I have often thought I might even eliminate monthly altogether. It's still profitable for us. It's just, do I want it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because really what I want is it's meant to be for people like me who love gems. Like, if you want to pay $9 to get some pricing information on something you inherited, like initially that was my idea, right? That people would want to know what a sapphire is worth. They'd pay $9 just to get access to that page, and then they would churn out, and that's fine. I made $9 that I wouldn't otherwise make. Now we have enough money, and we've been successful enough that we can start to make decisions, I think, about the people we're uniquely positioned to serve. And I think a lot of what I've been doing is starting to push myself to do that more, right? Like, could I get that money? Yeah, but I don't want that. I want a community of enthusiasts, and I want a year to show you that I can deliver you value. And if you're not willing to ante $75 for that, I don't know. Are you that enthusiastic about it? Like, maybe not.
Yeah.
It's not that much money. I mean, it is. I'm certainly not meaning to put it down, but it's stuff like that. So I have found if anyone takes one thing away from this podcast, huge fan of yearly subscriptions. I think that everyone's like, how do I manage churn? How do I manage churn? Like churn. It's like, I can guarantee you a 12-month subscription if you charge for a year and give them a discount.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have a year to prove your value. And the things that I've found are correlated with retention. You do not need a complicated model to understand retention. There's basically one thing that I found is heavily correlated, and it's date of last login. How engaged are they with the platform? Are they opening the emails? Are they reading the articles? Or are you throwing a smorgasbord of stuff at them and then trying to figure out post-mortem why they didn't renew? So I've had a lot of luck with that. So that's one of the sort of things I've discovered.
Yeah. And so, I mean, how do you transition someone? Because I think this is a really interesting piece where you're talking about the entry point for many people is a more transactional element where it's, they want to find out the value of something, or they discover you because they think, okay, well, I can go there and I can get the information I need. But then you talk about a community of enthusiasts. How do you develop someone from being a transactional customer to becoming a community enthusiast? And is that something that you're being intentional about and trying to facilitate, or is that more of a mindset thing on the side of the customer?
So I've actually concluded that you can't do it. I don't think it's an exercise of taking a person who wants to know. I mean, if you just think about a use case, right? Like, you inherited your grandmother's sapphire ring. You'd like to know what a sapphire is worth. You Google value of a sapphire. Turns out we rank number 1 for that in Google. You click through. You land on our page. You're like, man, I can't see this table unless I pay $9. You click. You pay $9. I personally do not believe there is an ascension campaign, there's a digital marketing strategy I can field to get you to buy a subscription, because I just don't think, I think that's it. It's an exercise in segmentation. And I think that's what a membership site is. Like, figure out which segment you're uniquely positioned to serve and serve the crap out of that segment and understand those customers' needs. Because I don't think our failure to convert that customer is indicative of anything other than that it's just not an offering that
it's a product market fit. Yeah. And so then, if you're not seeing it as a funnel, then for those community enthusiasts, are there any particular tactics that you have found to be effective in encouraging that repeat login, encouraging that engagement? What are the things how do you cultivate that enthusiasm and that passion for community with your members?
Yeah, so I'll take a step back. At the top of the funnel, it's our attitude. It's an attitude around segmentation and targeting. So we do weird and unique stuff with our content strategy. So we have the world's best article on sphalerite. You probably don't even know what sphalerite is. I barely know what sphalerite is. Okay, but it's interesting, right? The volume of search around sphalerite is basically non-existent, right? There are 7 people who search for sphalerite every week, right, or whatever, right? It's some insanely small number of people. But those people are, by definition, enthusiasts. And that's what's interesting to me, where I think we've been very successful at gaining members and pushing members onto the platform, is by investing in content that other people are simply unwilling to invest in, simply by virtue of the fact that the market for that content is incredibly small. But what I think they fail to see is that the segments of those customers are uniquely positioned to consume our particular product. So we invest heavily in those areas. So the start is we get those people onto the platform. And then we onboard them simply by letting them know, like, this is with thousands of articles, right? This is the depth of content you have available. We're going to send you emails. We're going to remind you what type of things you can do. We also have mini courses. We have certification courses if you really want to take it to the extreme. The mini courses are all included with we have a higher tier membership, which is the pro membership. Those mini courses are included. We spend a tremendous amount of money and time making them. They're very good. Like, it's good premium content. We try to get people engaged with those courses, engaged with our platform. And we try to start with customers predisposed to being an enthusiast. Our best customer, the customer we're really targeting, is the enthusiast who wants to become a pro.
Right.
But not a pro, not like someone who's like, I want to be a gemologist working in a store. But our target is a 50-year-old woman whose kids are out of the house, in college or whatever, finally has some time to focus on herself, has always been interested in gems, wants to learn about gems, wants to go to pawn shops and try to buy gems for cheap, or whatever the case may be, right? That's the person we want to bear hug and get into our membership community. And we find they stick around. They really do.
And do you have a community component? You talked about within your membership, or maybe you can just talk about your membership and like the components. You talked about at that pro level, you've got workshops or mini courses. What are the kind of, how are you delivering that value to increase that repeat login beyond the creating these big guides that seems like you produce?
Yeah, we've struggled with community on Gem Society. There's definitely a community. I don't know that people utilize it. It's not the cornerstone of our business. Community is not the cornerstone of our business. Whereas, and I do think that's, by the way, the IGS business on Ganoxin, which is another membership business we have around bench tool injury manufacturing, it is the cornerstone of our business. In many ways, we're trying to get that site to be from primarily community focused to being a lot more premium content focused, and the opposite on IGS, moving it from premium content over to community. I think the challenge is that it can be quite tough to develop these niche communities, as you know, probably way better than I do, because there's this funky bias. The people who are just starting out are really there to consume information from people who are quite experienced. People who are quite experienced are there to only interact with other people who are quite experienced. They will certainly respond to folks who are less experienced, but there is a big chicken and egg problem in community that makes it uniquely difficult to scale. But it's happened organically. But I would not. It would be disingenuous of me to suggest we are a fantastic gemology community. I don't think we are. But we're going to work on. It's an area of improvement.
Yeah. And so when you've got two membership sites, you've got gemsociety.org and ganoxian.com. When you're kind of like big picture or kind of, I guess, bottom line, what's the most kind of important metric for you when assessing the health of those membership sites? Is there one particular metric? I mean, you talked about the importance of last login, but ultimately, what's the number or what's the metric that's important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key metrics are, obviously gross profit. We don't measure net profit because it's very difficult to use net profit as a metric because so much goes into new content generation, et cetera. If you wanted to measure net profit, you would not be behaving the way that we're behaving, right? You would drive EBITDA or seller discretionary earnings, whatever you want to call it, by not investing so heavily in the platform itself. So gross profit, churn. Obviously, we certainly measure what our retention is. Traffic. The secret to our success is not a secret. We have 30,000 sessions a day in climbing from organic search, and our SEO strategy is stupidly, unbelievably simple. It is expensive, but it's simple, and it is. I don't think I'm even a member anymore, of SEO Moz or Ahrefs. They're all great tools, but our strategy, we don't even need it, right? It's super simple. We are in the lead for virtually all the terms that are shorter tail that we wanted to be in the lead for. Now there's a whole suite of other terms that we just don't have the content for, and so we haven't ranked because we're not willing to spread out a bunch of crappy content like peanut butter. So we have to put out the world's best content on any given topic, and we can't make mistakes, which means everything gets edited multiple times, so we can't do volume. But the stuff we push ranks really, really well. And when we're looking to evaluate what we might want to rank for, this is my SEO strategy. I was funded by Google. I spent years on SEO. It's pretty simple. If you want to know what is most relevant to a searcher for any given term, just look at what currently ranks for that term. Is it a perfect proxy? No, but I think it's the best proxy, right? The best proxy is what Google, who's a better arbiter of relevancy than you or I will ever be, has said these are the three things that are most relevant to the person who's searching for this. And you can look at what those pages have in common and figure out how you can do something that's better than what's on all three of those things. And generally, it's pretty obvious what it is about those three pieces of content that's responsive to the query. If the person says, what's the birthstone for January? And you look at what that's on there, it's going to be very clear why that thing ranks number one, right? And the thing that ranks page 2 is also pretty clear. So we have a privileged position in that our domain authority is awesome. So whatever we publish will rank. But the way we maintain that is by publishing the very best thing that's more relevant than none of this is new, I'm sure, to any of your listeners, but I think it could be instructive to hear something that we've built our whole business on this premise.
Yeah. And so you're focused primarily on content. So link building doesn't play a part in what you're doing?
Never built a link in my life. Never asked for a link. That's not true. I think maybe 5 years ago, I was like, we should reach out to some of these rock and mineral associations. But no, I wouldn't even know how to build a link. We don't do guest posting. We link out to people who provide us content that is specifically useful to the topics we're covering. So if we need a picture of sphalerite in its rough form and you have that picture, great news. You're going to get a link from a high authority website. But if you reach out to us and you're like, I'll pay you $300, put my link on the page, $500, $1,000. There's no amount of money you can pay to put your link on my site. You either are relevant or you're not relevant. It's free or it's not. It's always how we've run it.
Cool.
Yeah.
It's great that you don't need to do it. And I think focusing on content and the quality of that content is a really strong future-proof play of making sure that as long as you're producing content that's meets that user intent and is really high quality, then I'm sure in the long run that's going to prevail over whatever short-term tactics anyone else tries throwing at kind of fudging the results from Google.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't think you're going to outsmart Google in the long run when their whole business is relevancy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm sure you can win for 3 years. And we did this at CustomMade in the early days. I mean, we spun up permuted pages with like spread out 1 million pages across line. Listen, it works until it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, let's talk about your process. You invest a lot of time and money in producing really good content. Can you talk through how you do that, whether or not you have a team internally to produce it, or who comes up with the ideas? How do you process it, edit it, publish it? What's that process like?
Yeah. So it's contract writing, but interestingly, we've had the same. I think my lead contract writer has worked for us for God knows how long. I mean, I think he's worked for me in various capacities for 13 years, 14 years.
Wow.
Shockingly, once people get used to working with my unique personality, they like it. Shockingly, that's not for everyone, but people tend to stick around. So a lot of my team has just been around for a long time. We start off by saying, look, we don't pay the most, but we're extremely consistent. We're committed to investing in this for the long run. So if you deliver high quality work, if you're fastidious, if you're really focused, you have to actually care about this content, because you'll be bored out of your mind if you saw some of this stuff, if you don't think it's interesting. So who do I get, right? So my lead writer is a PhD anthropologist who retired from teaching, who lives in Texas. He's fantastic. We had a woman for a long, long time who was a master's in geology at Caltech. We've gotten some gemologists and gemology writers, but interestingly, we've had the best luck with geologists and other earth scientists, because they're technically oriented, and people from top-tier academic institutions, much more so than people with gemology credentials per se. Obviously, nothing wrong with gemology credentials, but it's quite scientific. I mean, it's quite technical, right? There's a lot of chemistry. There's a lot of, it is quite technical.
And so you, do you have like just a backlog of things that you want to have articles written about, and then you distribute them, or how does it work?
Yeah. So we have a backlog of articles that need to be edited constantly, because things are changing. An article hasn't been touched in a long time. It needs to be tweaked. It needs to be updated. New gem deposits have been found. Other gem deposits have been extinguished. New treatments to gems. People are always trying to treat gems and make them look better. New treatments have arisen. We need to keep up with that. And then there's new topics we want to cover, so we need to keep up with that. So we sort of have our head contract writer sit on top of everything. We have areas that we've expanded into, like diamond affiliate type content, where we're trying to help people, consumers who land on our site who are interested in diamond-oriented content, who might need some assistance figuring out what aspects they should care about. So we've written some content around that. It's monetized in a different way. They're not going to become members, obviously, because that's not what they were looking for. But we were able to leverage our domain authority to help some of those folks. So there's a few different teams of writers that we're utilizing, and as every year, hopefully the business keeps growing, I hope, and we spread out our footprint a little more. We can afford to spend more on content. So it's not, I think, another point, a thing that I think has made us successful is we've really always invested any profit that we make from the website we just reinvest in more content. So it's not like next year I'm going to make more money than this year. It's like, oh great, we can finally afford to put a writer on this full time, and they can really build out this area. And the irony of this is like this thing keeps growing and it keeps growing and it keeps growing because, it's a simple strategy.
And then in terms of your tech stack for managing this, are you using Trello, or is there any tools you're using, or is this all very Google Sheets? How do you manage that kind of backlog, what everyone's writing in, where it's at, the content? How are you managing all this?
Yeah, I mean, the stack is, so I'm not a technologist, I'll preface this by saying that, but I spent a bunch of years building these businesses. So the foundation of both sites is WordPress, so PHP, of course. It's managed hosting on Google Cloud. For internal management, we use like Segmetrics, which is like a SQL overlay, basically. Kind of helps business people make decisions without needing to write SQL queries. MemberMouse for member management. What else? ActiveCampaign for email. The smorgasbord of tools that probably a lot of membership site owners use. And then what I've found is, because we're such a heavy traffic site, at least on Gem Society, speed is obviously a big driver of rankings. Very difficult, unfortunately, for us now to use off-the-shelf plugins for almost anything. They're just too heavy. So usually we have a specific piece of functionality, we write our own plugin for it.
Right.
And Ganoxin shares somewhat of that same infrastructure. I mean, the good news is it's largely static content, right? It's becoming more app-like over time. But it's still, I think right now we need to improve search. We're going to spin up an instance and implement Elasticsearch.
Yeah.
We sort of just solve problems as they arise. On the CustomMade side, the stack is more complicated. It's written in Python in the Django framework. But my co-founder in the CustomMade business is a Princeton engineer, worked at Endeca before he sold it to Oracle. Like he's
He likes that stuff.
Yeah, I wouldn't even pretend to be able to manage it. But this, I think one of the cool things that's happened in the 10 years or 12 years since I became a technology entrepreneur is, the stuff that you can get off the shelf is crazy. I used to build all this stuff from scratch in 2008. I built a member management system in 2009. It was a nightmare. Oh, this person wants to prorate their subscription. Okay, like, I don't know. What's the code? Like, how do we do it? Now MemberMouse just handles it. And there's 10 other plugins that do the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely getting easier. I want to, it sounds like you spend and invest a lot on content. That's been a recurring theme. Invest in content. How much, and how do you cost it out? I guess in terms of producing that content, do you cost it out on 1,000 words cost us X? How much does content cost you to produce?
A fortune. The answer to your question is I do a terrible job costing it out. The appropriate way to do it is to say, okay, I spend X dollars on this, spend $600 on this article. This article should generate X dollars of revenue over time. How long does it take me to get a return on my capital? Like, in a perfect world, that's how I would do it. How do I actually do it? Which piece of content is on fire, has gone from smoldering to on fire because it's not good? And which piece of content do I just feel like I can't believe we don't have something written on this? I want it. I just want it in our collection. Is that intelligent? Is that the most efficient way to do it? Like, no, it's not. But,
So do you pay writers based on a per post or per word, or how do you figure that out?
Yeah, I've never paid per word. I just pay by the hour.
Okay.
I've always paid by the hour, and here's how our compensation structure works. We tend to start you, and we've changed this a little bit over time, but I tend to start you pretty at what I think is a fair price. It tends to hover between $18 and $20 an hour, maybe a little more. And if you're scientifically oriented, you're a good researcher, etc., you can usually get stuff done reasonably quickly, but I don't ride you to get stuff done quickly. I'd rather you get it done right than get it done fast. I've been doing it long enough that I have a pretty good idea of how long it would take to get done. And I use that as a barometer, but mostly I'm looking for people who are passionate about the content. They care about the stuff they're putting out in the world, that it's accurate. They're excited about it. And I pay them accordingly. And then at the end of the year, I have the what I like to think of as our profit sharing plan, which is not really a profit sharing plan. It's because we rarely turn a substantial profit, but it's mostly like, how effectively do we perform this year in terms of gross profit? And I set aside money, and I send writers a check. Sometimes it can be a substantial check. You make $20 an hour, or you get a big check. It can be substantial. So, and I think people know my pitch to writers. If you're trying to build a writing team, my pitch to writers is, listen, you could get $40 an hour. The question is, how many hours is that person going to pay for before they move on to another project? They move on to another thing. Like, talk to my writers. They've been with us. Everyone measures their tenure in years. They have 100% flexible gig. They can work a lot. They can work a little. Like, I need them to work a certain amount, but they can work at night. They can work on the weekends. They cannot work on the weekends. Like, they can work from anywhere. Like, and it's a super consistent gig, and we take care of them. I think that if you position and merchandise your writing offering in that way, you get a team of believers that really wants to put out great stuff. I think if you're in the business of getting, a guy in Ukraine to crank out 1,000 words at 2 cents a word, I think you're going to get what you pay for. And that can work, maybe if you're selling power tools, but that's not what we do.
Yeah. No, I think the idea of paying someone on an hourly basis is so much better than on a per article or word basis, because in my experience of paying on that per article basis, you find that the sentences just start getting super fluffy, the value's not there, repetition, it's just insane. And because you're paying them the wrong way, and it just encourages the wrong behavior. It's like, why use one word when you could use 10? Because that's an extra $1.
Exactly, right. No, it's crazy, right? I mean, like, it's hard to imagine why people do it, but they do. It's like, because the article I read on this blog says you need a 2,000 word article to rank, not a 1,500 word article. We don't do that. We have 10,000 word articles, and we have 500 word articles. It's like, it's like the content needs to be like a skirt, it's short enough to be interesting, but long enough to cover the important stuff,
Tell us what you're trying to get better at, or what's on your roadmap as you're evolving this membership subscription business. Yeah, what's on your roadmap, and what are the challenges that you're dealing with that you're trying to overcome?
Yeah, I think it's just segmentation is so hard. It's like, you can't be everything to everybody. So who are we uniquely positioned to serve? It's like, it's easy to ask the question, but answering it is tough. And then it's like, well, what model do we deploy for those customers? I think, as you've seen, right, it's like, just because you've been doing it doesn't mean it's the perfect model.
Yeah.
And it's just matching up segments of customers and business model, and making sure that you're getting the right read on the stuff that's working. And mostly I'm looking for areas to double down in. And it gets tougher. And that's on Gem Society. On Ganoxin, we inherited a community. It would be a little disingenuous to suggest we built a community. So we don't have the same privilege, I would say, or cachet, or privilege, I think is the right thing, as like you guys do, right? You built your community. We bought our community, and we massaged it into a community offering. We need to come up with something that we've built that adds value to our customers, right? And I think that's the challenge with Ganoxin. In many ways, Ganoxin, much larger addressable market than Gem Society, because people who are interested in bench jewelry, jewelry manufacturing, creating jewelry, there's more people who are like, I'd love to learn to make jewelry, than people who are like, I'd love to learn about gems and gemology.
Yeah.
So what are those people looking for? What do we do about it?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think that's the challenge, is just figuring that stuff out. But it's cool. I mean, it's fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that product market fit question is an eternal one, where you're thinking, okay, well, there's always going to be a better way to deliver a better product market fit, and it really comes down to how much you're willing to segment and adapt your business model. So one of the things we're doing at the moment is actually trying to remove those transactional kind of customers out of our membership completely, because if they're coming to us just for a resource, let's just sell them the resource they want, rather than trying to force them into membership. So we developed standalone products that simply deal with that transactional element, and then we will try and upsell them to membership, but we're trying to deliver on what they want. And I think the mistake that we made was trying to force people into a membership that they didn't want, and that just results in a high level of churn. They got what they needed, then they get in, they get what they need, get out, and that's not what ultimately we're trying to build. So I think it's really worth doubling down on that, thinking through that product market fit, because if you can get it right, the business model works much more effectively.
Yeah, I think there's this whole thing, I see this a lot. Membership businesses that are membership businesses because they've called themselves a membership business and they sell a membership. But you have to ask yourself, like, I think you made a great point, right? Like, are these people members or are they shoppers? Those are two totally different things. Like, just because they bought something and you're packaged it as a membership, but they're going to churn next year, so they just bought something for the price of their membership. They're not members. It's not recurring revenue. It's revenue. And to be recurring revenue, like, they need to be recurringly interested in the value you're adding. Otherwise, they're shoppers. Just sell them something and let them go on their way. I honestly think that's it's a very simple conclusion, but it's brilliant, right? I mean, it's exactly the right approach.
Yeah. Cool. Well, let's wrap this up with a lightning round. I want to know, what is the best advice you've ever received?
I think that common wisdom is that diversification mitigates risk. And I have found in my life that focus mitigates risk. If you focus on one thing and you do it well, I think you will do better than if you try to do a bunch of stuff in case something fails.
Which of your personal habits do you think has contributed most to your success?
My work reluctance. I love delegating, so I like to be at a high level, and so it's forced me to adapt and hire people that are better than me, more efficient than me, and who like doing all the things that I don't like to do.
You said you don't actually subscribe to many tools now, but I'm wondering if there's any websites you go to recently, or tools that you do use that you find super useful.
Yeah, I'll tell you a membership site, since we're on the topic of membership sites, that I think has done the most amazing job. I would argue it is the single, like, I'm sure there's tons of great membership sites. It's the best membership site I've ever seen. It's chess.com. Unreal. My son is learning to play chess. He's become quite good. He's 7. As good as a 7-year-old can get at chess, I guess. But the value that this thing adds is just amazing. The tools they have are unbelievable. Their premium content is amazing. I've never felt like I get more value than the value they deliver at this website. It's worth subscribing, honestly, just to explore their offering. That's how good it is. Cool. And we use it all the time. So,
have you read any books recently that you'd recommend?
Yeah, my buddy Mike pushed me to read Traction, which everybody was talking about for the longest time, and I think has spawned this whole EOS implementer thing. And this is a good book. I mean, it's interesting. I I am less enthusiastic about the notion than other people are. I think it's one tool, one way to manage your business. I think it's fantastic for folks who don't have a lot of structure and need a framework. I think it works amazingly.
Cool.
But it's worth reading. He was right to recommend it.
And to cap this off, so for someone at the beginning of their digital media journey, what is one piece of advice that you'd give them as they're on their way to creating content, building community? What's one bit of advice that you give to them?
I think it's all, I would boil it all down to the 4 Ps, right? So this is what you need. Patience, number 1. Persistence, prudence. Those used to be the only 3, but I added this one recently. People, right? So it takes a long time, longer than you think. You have to actually want it. If you're willing to quit when things get hard, just don't bother. It's not going to work. You got to do intelligent stuff. It's hard to do intelligent stuff. You got to be analytical in your approach. You got to really be prudent. You have to take risks, but they need to be prudent risks. And the last one is just surround yourself with really good people. Network into really good people. Learn from their experiences and share your own experiences with other people. That's what I'd recommend.
Awesome. Seth, where can people find out more about you and all that you've got going on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm easy to find. Seth at CustomMade.com, Seth at GemSociety.org. If you want to explore our membership sites, I'd encourage you to buy membership. If you don't want to, you can just email me and I will happily give you a trial. But I'd love to talk to anybody who is getting started. I love helping other people out. I never expect anything in return. And yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to talk about myself. Who doesn't love
that? Well, Seth, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been great having you with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
And if you want to find out more, head to indiemedia.club, where you can subscribe and join our club, which is all about developing better content and better community businesses. So check it out, indiemedia.club. But until next time, thanks for listening.